So in the first session, we looked at the interface for Stringer. You can run commands from this ribbon tab here. Alternatively, you can run a Stringer Topo from the Toolspace. And to open up the Toolspace, you just select the Toolspace button from the ribbon. So moving forward, most commands that I run will be from the Toolspace. I favor the Toolspace because you can also see the objects that you've created as well. So in this video, we're going to take a look at importing and reducing our raw data. And to do that, we're going to run connect. If you're running from the ribbon, you can run the command import and reduce. So I'm going to run connect, and the following window will appear. This is a modeless window that you can park onto another monitor. Great thing about a lot of the windows in Stringer is they are modeless, and so you can park them across multiple monitors. So we're creating a completely new project. So I'm going to go to File, New Project, and the first thing we do here is give the project a name. So this is going to be the survey. It's our famous Footy Oval project. So project name is Footy Oval. Under details, you've got the option of filling out who the surveyor was, the date of the survey. This is just for your own reference. And down the bottom, we pick the type of COGO point we want to create. So I'd mentioned in the last session that we can create points using Stringer's built-in COGO point object. We can also create using the Civil 3D COGO points. And in this video series, I'm going to work with the Civil 3D COGO points. Now, data storage is really important with Stringer. Now, by default, if I bring in data through Connect, by default, pack mode will be turned on, which means that all Stringer-related data will be stored inside the DWG file. And this is actually recommended. If you're bringing in data, or say you already had some Civil 3D points in the drawing and you were to use Stringer, pack mode will be off by default. So I will show you in this session how to toggle on pack mode to ensure that the data has been stored inside the DWG. Now, if you don't use pack mode, that's okay. There'll just be another folder next to your DWG file that stores the information. Issues could occur if you give someone else is using Stringer and you only supply them with the DWG, not the data folder, then they won't have access to all the Stringer information. So the cleanest thing to do is always make sure you use pack mode. So that's what this is related to. Also, we have a tab for default styles, very similar to what I showed in the first video, where you can just tell the software what default string sets you use for alpha or numeric code sets. And I wouldn't worry too much about what's on the advanced tab at this stage. So I'm going to go straight to create project. And the next thing we need to do is add in our raw data. Now, you can actually do this just by dragging and dropping the file onto this form, and the software will detect the file type and then import accordingly. But we'll do it the manual way, and I'm going to do this by selecting add. So on the left hand side here, we'll list all your raw data, and you could have multiple raw data files for day 1 survey, day 2 survey, etc. So I'm going to add day 1, click on open, and I'm going to grab the field survey.str file. Now, down the bottom right, we can see that the software is looking for SDR files. And if I click on the file type here, you can see all the different files that we support. So, RW5, there's some Trimble files, Carlson files, etc. Leica XML. There's actually 2 options for Leica. We can read the raw observations from the XML, or we could read the reduced points from the XML. There's also a point file option here as well, so we could load in a a comma delimited PNZ file. So a few options here, and we're just going to click on Field Survey, Open, and then select Add. So by doing this, the raw data is now displayed in the editor. So we can see, the notes at the top. We can see HT for height instrument, and as I select on an entry on the right hand side, we can perform some edits. So I could override the instrument height, the target height. We can see the control points for our stations. We can see the orients, and then we can see the shots that we've picked up as well. So as I said, you can click on an entry here and make an edit. For example, maybe I wanted to make this instrument height 2, enter. Now what you'll find is any edit that the software makes or you perform, that entry will turn yellow. So we will track all the edits that you perform. If I wanted to reset that value back to the original, then I can go right click and select on reset item, say yes to reset, and then you can see that value goes back to its original. Now just on the right click, if I right click on this side shot here, there's an option to set ignore status. So by doing that, we've ignored that entry, and when the software reduces the raw data, it'll ignore that line. In this case, it won't create this point, this shot here. If I want to bring it back in the mix, we just go set ignore status again, and you can see it's available. The right click also has some other useful options. So add item allows you to add in just another entry. You can see the different types of data entries that we support. So we've got note, shot, coord, which is control, prism, correction, orient, and instrument height. And you can add these into the raw data. In fact, there is an option, I sort of skipped over it, there's an option to create a blank raw data file, and you can actually build one of these up from scratch if you wanted to. Okay, so that's the raw data. Click edit, edits will be tracked. If you select and right click, there's a few options here. Importantly, reset if you make an edit, ignore, add item, and I'll show search and replace a little bit later, which is quite handy. So let's have a bit of a look at the data in the 2D viewer. So if I open up the 2D viewer, we get a view of the display of all the points, the side shots, the control, and we can sort of see how our survey's been orientated. So the beauty of the 2D viewer is we get to have a look at our survey before we've actually committed to creating the COGO points in Civil 3D. So I just wanted to show you the survey in this viewer to start off with. What we're going to do is actually transform the survey onto MGA coordinates. So I'm going to close. I wanted you to take a snapshot of how it looks now, and you'll see how it transforms when we set up the control or add the MGA coordinates. So let's go and do that. From the control drop down, you'll see control editor. So I'm going to select on that and open it. And what this does is it lists all of our control points. In fact, if you select on one of these entries, you'll see we can zoom to where that control point is defined in the raw data. Now you can manually edit the coordinates of the control through this interface. There's actually a number of ways to edit the easting and northings using these options here. So if there's another COGO point in the drawing that we want to reference, we can pick on that COGO point. That's a Stringer COGO point. If it's a Civil 3D COGO point in the drawing, we could grab the eastings and northings from that. Or we can just pick a point anywhere in CAD and say those coordinates we want to apply to that selected control. And if points exist in the drawing that have the same number as our control, then we can take the eastern and northerns from those points and apply them. What I'm going to do is use import control file, and if you remember in the last session I showed field survey control points. This lists our control. Let me just open it up. Oh, I can't do that because it double click confirms it. But if you remember, that control file was a PennZ. It had the point number, the eastern, northern, elevation, etc. Description. So I picked the file format here, click OK, and then the software's reading those MGA coordinates. Now, the elevations we're keeping the same. If I ticked on edit control elevations, then any elevations from that control would also be brought across. Now, we actually haven't committed these changes to the control yet. You can still see that the numbers are still on for the eastern and northern, still on the arbitrary system. When I click on apply, then that change will happen. Now, you do have the option of running create update COGO points. What that does is creates the points in CAD now as Civil 3D COGO points, and you might want to use the Civil 3D Travis adjustment or something like that to adjust your control, and then re-put the or update the coordinates with that Travis adjustment you did. And if you did that, that's when you would use by auto find same point number. So those coordinates will come from the points that have been adjusted in CAD here. So when I click on apply changes, you can see that all our controls now updated with the new coordinates, and we can go and select those and we can see that that's happened, and those entries are now yellow because we've edited those entries. So if I was to select and right click, I could reset it back to the original coordinate. You can also, in the control data editor, click on reset control as well, and that will reset it back to how it originally was. The other thing I want to point out is quite often with these tables that you see in Stringer, we often have these buttons here. One is to output an AutoCAD table, and the other one is to output a CSV file. So any table you see can be outputted to an AutoCAD table or a CSV file. So I'm going to click on close. So let's go and open up the 2D viewer again. And now we can see that our survey shifted around onto MGA. And what I'm going to do now is just explain this 2D viewer and what you can do with it. So let's have a look at the ribbon. So refresh is just an update. Now, if we do make changes in the raw data, the viewer should automatically update, but refresh is just there as a bit of a backup. Now we can see all our points. At the moment, we're just showing the point number, but we could turn on the elevation and the code. Okay, but I'll just leave it on point number for now. So we're showing the radiations. These are the lines from the control point station to the point that was picked up, so you can toggle on and off the display of those. And you can see that they're colored differently based on the setup. Okay, now on the right hand side we can see the 6 stations, and we could say turn off any radiations from, say, that control or this one. Okay, so that's the radiations. The orients, let's turn off the radiations. We can see how we've oriented the control points, and you'll see later that a lot of the Backsight checks that have been taken, the deltas are way out. I don't know what happened with this survey, but the Backsight checks have some errors. Now, if I zoom in, we get 2 badges. This badge representing that it's a control point, and this badge here with the red circle indicating that the check shot was outside the tolerance. So anyway, we can see the orients and we can click on those and we can see information regarding those. But the other thing worth noting is the fact that we can see some Backsight errors. So if I click on this report, it'll actually list all our, this is the orientation report, it'll list all our shots between stations and the orients. And the deltas here are red because, you know, they're way outside the range. I'm sure when you do your survey, it'll almost be the checks will be almost be spot on, like these checks, which are good. So it'll show any errors, and then once again, I mean, you could export this to a table or a CSV file. So that's the orients. The other thing worth mentioning is if you do click. Actually, probably on the radiations. If you click on the radiations or the points, you'll see in the raw data it updating to the location of that shot in the raw data. So I find that quite useful just to be able to tie back to the raw data as we graphically select in this interface. So that's orients. You can turn off the badges for the control points. You can even turn off the Backsight errors if you don't want to see those as well, but we'll leave the control points on. Now, I mentioned in the last video, we also had aerial imagery. So I'm going to run a command called map I insert. And this allows me to bring in a georeferenced image. So let's just go to that location. We want to bring in a JPEG. Let's find the JPEG. Open that. Okay, and that's so that world file that I mentioned holds all the coordinates. So if you click OK, we can see that image has been imported in the right location. Now, in the 2D view, we can actually overlay that image, and let's do that by clicking on Aerial Image, selecting the image from the drawing, and then we can see that our image has been overlaid. So this is sort of good confirmation that you know that your survey's overlaid in the right spot. Yeah, it's good to see your survey in context with the imagery. So that's how to add aerial imagery. We can toggle on and off the display of that as well. So I showed you the orientation report. We'll get to point coordinates a little bit later. This is just showing us the reduced easting northing elevation of all the points. We had a look at the control editor, so viewing the control points. The next command I want to show you, I think it's quite useful. It's called Watch Survey. And how it works is we pick our raw data, and then as we use this slider, we can see the order at which our control points were set up and our shots were taken. Now, there is an option just to play this to sort of animate through, but I like just using the slider just to sort of see the survey. So I find that quite useful. So that's the watch survey option. So we've pretty much covered most of the viewer. As I said, it's great to be able to see your survey before you commit to creating the points in CAD. So we've covered most of what's on the Home tab. The Settings tab really just relates to things like the background color, the colors of the different orient lines, and that Backsight error badge that we saw was appearing because the deltas were outside 0.5. Okay, so that's what that was referring to. So that's the 2D viewer. I'm going to close that down. And the final thing I'm going to do in this video is just open up the reduced coordinates window. So what this does is list all of our points, easting, northing elevation description. So it's good to review this before we commit to creating the points. We can see that there are some duplicate point numbers which Civil 3D won't like, and that's because of these check shots that we have. If I was to say select on those points and go to Tools, then we could exclude them, and those points won't be created as Civil 3D points in CAD. In fact, there's a number of different ways to exclude or include. You can do it by point number range. You can do it by elevation range. So, maybe you want to make sure that elevations that were picked up for whatever reason less than 0 aren't included. You can also, for large surveys, only include points within a polyline. So you could draw a polyline. We could draw a polyline, particular area, and so we'll only bring in points in that area. Okay. And the last option here is output convex hull. And what it does is draws a polyline around the extents of all of our points. And I find this useful as well, say if I don't have aerial imagery, just to sort of give me confirmation in CAD, where the points are going to be created. So this is the reduced coordinates form, which I certainly recommend you look at before you commit to creating the COGO points as well. And there's some useful options for filtering. So this is Connect. We haven't created the Civil 3D points yet, and I will in the next session. But the thing to remember is if I close Connect and reopen it again, all the data is still there. In fact, even when I create the COGO points, if I make edits in the raw data and click on Update, then those COGO points will move. So anyway, you can access Connect at any point in time. It's not like a one-pass command. Okay, so that's enough for this session. In the next video, we're going to go and create the COGO points, and we're also going to go and create the strings as well. And then we're going to have a look at some display options and a few other things as well.